Adonai, Ohei Amo Yisrael, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Shalom Uvracha. This evening we study Parshat Vayetze, and amongst the many lessons we study in Parshat Vayetze about Yaakov's years of service and employment as a paid laborer for his father-in-law Lavan. After years of suffering from the way that he was treated or mistreated, Yaakov decides that it's time to leave. He can no longer stay in the house of his uncle Lavan. And in the midst of his exasperation, he shares with his wives how dedicated he really was to Lavan. But he feels that as much energy as he put into it, it was all to no avail. V'atena yidaten. And you surely know, Ki b'chol kochi avadati et avichem.
Why didn't they just go? They were over bat mitzvah. They're allowed to go. They don't need the permission of the father anymore.
Well, I think it's only decent. You don't just take, a wife away from her family, especially if you're dedicated to living there. I think Rabbi Schwartz once said, he said it jokingly or seriously, but he says it says in the Torah that a man, should leave his father and his mother and cling to his wife. It doesn't say in the Torah that a woman should leave her father and mother and cling to her husband. Good question, Elliot. He's explaining to him why he has to leave. There's a certain kind of pressure upon him. And he wasn't dealing with a person who was so straightforward.
Still have to be decent.
Yaakov says, V'atena yidaten. And you surely know that I was so dedicated. I put my whole self into working for your father. I served your father with all of my might, all of my energy. Ki b'chol kochi avadati et avichem. In a different context, in our Parshat, Yaakov comments, Hayiti bayom achalani choref v'kerach balayla v'tidad shnati me'inai. I suffered scorching heat. It was burning hot. He was out there with the shade under the sun. Burning hot conditions during the day. Freezing condition, frost at night. I couldn't sleep, but I remained dedicated. So although one may read these texts as a description of how one particular great person, Yaakov, the individual, chose to work, in our tradition, many of Yaakov's activities serve as models for the Torah requirements for how a Torah-observant Jew is to work for his or her employer. Seemingly being a religious worker doesn't only mean going home early enough on Friday to properly observe Shabbat, although of course that's crucial. Being a religious worker doesn't only mean eating only kosher products during coffee and lunch breaks, although of course that's crucial. Being a religious worker doesn't only mean maintaining proper levels of modesty and morality and all of the mingling that goes on in offices, although of course that's crucial. Yaakov teaches us that a religiously sensitive worker, a religiously sensitive employee understands and internalizes the following law in the Maimonidean code. If you're interested, it's the last paragraph in the Rambam in Hilchot Schirut. Chayav la'avod b'chol kocho. A laborer, a person working for someone else, is required to put his whole self, to put her whole entire being into the job. They have to be dedicated with all of their strength, all of their energies. And what's the proof text? Says the Rambam. The term the Rambam uses is an unusual term. I'm not an expert by any means in Maimonidean terms, but look what he calls it. Shaharei, look it up in Hilchot Schirut. Shaharei Yaakov HaTzadik Amar Ki B'chol Kochi Avadati et Avichen. Yaakov, the righteous Yaakov said, I served your father. Cheating one's employer. Let's say coming late to work and leaving early. Without anyone knowing, you come in late, you sneak out early, right? That's not a Yaakov model. Acting differently when the boss is around, as opposed to when he or she is not there, right? So when the cat's away, the mice will play. Using office equipment and supplies without permission doesn't seem to fit the Yaakov mold. We are taught in the ethics of the fathers to be sensitive. You're working for other people. In Talmudic literature, we read of how careful the rabbis taught us to be when we are being paid for our services. Even certain religious obligations. There's nothing more serious than the rabbis than religious obligations. Even certain religious obligations were modified in certain cases in order to assure that employees don't spend too much time of their employer's time saying blessings and prayers. Isn't that amazing? There's an entire discussion in Brachot, Tractate Brachot, page 16, as to whether a person who is being paid as a laborer can recite the entire Birchat HaMazon. Can he recite the whole grace after meals? Maybe the person who's working for someone else, you ate your sandwich, you ate your lunch, fine. So maybe the first 3 blessings are enough. Maybe you shouldn't say Hatov HaMeitiv. Maybe you should incorporate Hatov HaMeitiv in the earlier blessings. Why? Because you're on somebody else's time here. Ki b'chol kochi avadati. An amazing Gemara. Every time I read, I can't believe how long does it take? How long does it take to read the 4th blessing of Birchat HaMazon? I never understood that Gemara. Never. How long does it take? Even if you read it slowly, we're talking about a very short amount of time, and they want to modify the laws of blessing. We're required to stand, to rise for Torah sages. But, say the rabbis, maybe not when it's in the course of your employment. Let's say you're working in an office and the chief rabbi walks in and you're being paid from 8 to 4. So the Gemara discussed at length, maybe there is no obligation. You're not allowed to stand up. We stand up on your own time. None of the rabbis tell. It's an unusual chidush, right?
How long does it take?
How long does it take, right, to stand up, to sit down? The rabbis tell of great early sages, such as Abba Hilkiah, in Tractate Ta'anit, page 23.
Great street.
What?
I used to live on Abba Hilkiah.
Yeah,
Great man.
maybe more than living on the street. You have to observe everything he did. One of the greatest people, great model.
I worked
great
hard on
models
that
of
story.
behavior. Abba Hilkiah, who refused, people came over to him to talk to him, and he was working for someone else. He refused to answer them. He refused to indulge in conversation with strangers during his hours of employment. Is it permissible to talk on the cell phone when you're being paid from, let's say, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m.? A great rule to work with is the blessing that the esteemed sage Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai gave his students. The students came to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and they said, it was the very end of his life, he said, Rabbeinu, Barcheinu, our great rabbi, could you give us a blessing? Bless us. Amar lahem, Yehi ratzon, sheyehei morah shamayim aleichem, ki morah basar v'dam. May you be as afraid of God as you are of people. May you be as afraid of God. They said, Rabbi, that's a blessing? He says, yes, that's a very great blessing. I wish that we would live by that rule. If only we would be able to be as aware of God's presence as we are of people's presence, then maybe the levels of productivity in the work field, maybe the levels of dedication to our places of labor would be ever so different. Yaakov is the paradigm of an individual who lived with this awareness of God wherever he was. And that's why he was able to excel in emphasizing and demonstrating great levels of integrity when working even for a person who was very far from being moral. Ki b'chal kolchi avarati et avichem. May we learn from the great model of our father Jacob, and may we try to incorporate into our daily lives this message of b'chal kolchi avarati et avichem. Thank you so much for listening.
Which will see all men free and tyrants disappear.